Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pellevitt. I'll be your host for today's presentation, and the presentation will be led by a real medical doctor, Dr. Michael Patmos, who will be discussing things that the Health and Human Resources head, who is not a medical doctor. His name is RFK Jr., if you're not familiar with him in the United States. He is an environmental lawyer who pretends he knows something about medicine, and we're going to be discussing statins versus peptides, believe it or not, because on the internet, that's a big thing, is these alternative medicines that have not been proven, where people are moving toward that as opposed to the proven medicines out there. So with that, with no further ado, we'll turn it over to a real doctor, Dr. Michael Patmos, who you've all seen before on this network, who will give us an indication of what's going on in Washington, D.C. with an environmental lawyer leading the way into medicine. Apparently, looks like he's not leading, he's misleading the way into medical science.
Well, good morning, Nick. Good morning, everybody. Yes, it's very, very interesting times that we live in. I'll just make a couple brief comments about this issue of peptides and so forth. But there's even a breaking story that I think is even more significant that we need to talk about. But so, as we all know, Robert Kennedy is a lawyer. He has no training in science or in medicine. He has deep-seated delusional beliefs about vaccines and has made many statements and has a philosophy around vaccination that is not supported in the medical literature, such as, blaming vaccination for increasing diagnosis rates of autism and so forth. But one of the things that Kennedy is very well known for is his use of alternative and fringe medical treatments. Like we know, for example, and he's been very open about his use of methylene blue. He's even been he's been videotaped on an airplane dropping methylene blue into a glass of water on a plane. Methylene blue is a substance that has really only valid for one or two medical conditions. He takes it as a general therapeutic thing. There's no evidence that it is effective for that. He also is a big proponent of testosterone use, and testosterone use is appropriate for people who have low testosterone levels, but it's not considered appropriate or safe for general use for people with normal testosterone. But there's another area of where Kennedy is really out on the fringe, and that is his use of peptides. Now, peptides may have some very significant clinical role at some point, but where we stand with them right now is that peptides are have not really been thoroughly studied in randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials. The kinds of things that Kennedy likes to talk about when he talks about restoring trust in science with gold standard evidence. Well, there's no gold standard evidence whatsoever around peptides. There may be some utility, and some peptides, for example, that mimic growth hormone, have a role in the treatment of short stature in children and so forth. There's a theoretical basis for a lot of the peptides, but it hasn't been really thoroughly studied yet. So here's the hypocrisy of Kennedy personally using peptides and pushing peptides into the public sphere without the same kind of gold standard science that he claims he's all about. So it's really very hypocritical. But there's something even more important that I would, with all due respect, I'd love to bring up today, and that is a follow-up on what has happened with Dr. Vinay Prasad. For those of you who follow this, Dr. Prasad's story I've never seen anything quite like it. Dr. Prasad is a very highly educated, he's brilliant. It's not an overstatement to say that he's highly educated and brilliant. He's a physician. He has been trained in oncology, hematology, oncology. He is board certified, and he holds a faculty appointment at UCSF. And he became he started his own Substack called Sensible Medicine, and he wrote a lot of stuff that was very much anti-vax, that he was noticed by Kennedy. And Robert Kennedy appointed him to be to the FDA to serve as the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, which is probably the number 2 job at FDA. So Prasad took this job and proceeded to blow up on the job. He was fired within a matter of months for saying things that were really outrageous, and he got his job back. I believe that the story is that he went to his boss, Marty Makary, who went to RFK, who went to Trump, and gave him a reprieve and let him come back to his role at FDA, where he was fired a second time just a few months later. And the reason why he was fired from FDA is because of not because of his lack of medical knowledge, but his management style. He's had multiple complaints from people at FDA that he harasses people, he berates people on the job, and he created a hostile work environment with multiple formal complaints filed against him by employees at FDA. So he was let go, and now he's planning to return to UCSF and to his faculty role. But here's the story, and I've never seen this. His colleagues at UCSF, the faculty and staff at the University of California, San Francisco, are circulating a petition online, which I have put links to on my LinkedIn page and in my Substack and Facebook page. You can read the petition. So here we have his colleagues at UCSF who have uh, uh, developed a petition which is circulating online, gathering signatures, demanding that the administration at UCSF not allow Dr. Prasad to come back. His colleagues don't want him back on the faculty at that medical school. And that's really shocking. I've never seen that. A doctor can be removed from the medical staff of a hospital by their peers through an action called peer review. If you practice bad medicine or you do something that's very unprofessional, you can be brought up before your colleagues on the peer review committee. And if deemed sufficient egregious, uh, uh, bad action on your part, you can be removed from the medical staff by your peers in what's called a peer review matter. Those things are typically protected from public. They're not revealed publicly. It's just the doctor quietly resigned their privileges, but it's because they got thrown off the staff at a hospital. Well, that's not what's happening with Dr. Prasad. There's no peer review issue here over his clinical care. This is his colleagues who don't want him back, not because of his lack of training or a lack of medical skill or medical knowledge. It's because of his personality. They don't want him back, and they list the reasons in the petition. They feel that he is toxic. His personality is toxic. He's verbally abusive to his colleagues. He calls people names, foul, vulgar names. He's blatantly anti-vax, and he has this he hides behind scientific knowledge to sort of attack anybody who promotes vaccines, especially mRNA vaccines, and he really attacks people who are supportive of it. I mean, and he doesn't just attack on the scientific routes where we have scientific debate between doctors. It's congenial and respectful debate. Well, he calls people names. Let me give you some graphic examples. I'm sorry but these are his own words, and these are the things that he has written. Dr. Prasad, and this is how he came to my attention. He wrote an article on his Substack a couple of years ago with the most vulgar title. The title of his article, this is published on Sensible Medicine, is Blood, Shit, Piss, and Pus. And this is what this doctor wrote: blood, shit, piss, and pus. And the point of his article, the point he's trying to make is that, and he alleges in the article, that during the course of his day-to-day work at the hospital, presumably University of California, San Francisco, he claims that he comes into direct contact with blood and body fluids every day. And that because of his direct exposure to these dangerous, potentially infected blood and body fluids, that he's somehow more important than the administrators of the hospital who don't come in contact with these substances, who have authority over him and who can tell him that he has to wear a mask or that he has to observe some other infection control policy. He was very resistant to the infection control policies that were implemented around COVID. So he goes and he attacks the hospital administrators and and says, "Well, I come in contact with this stuff every day, and you don't, so you can't tell me what to do." That was the point of his vulgar article. Well, I read that, and I'm trained in infection control. I said, "Wait, whoa, wait a second here. He's not coming in. If you come in contact with direct contact with blood or body fluids in a hospital environment, there's only two things you can say. One is you violated infection control practices, gowns, gloves, masks, etc. We have infection control practices in hospitals to prevent coming in direct contact with blood and body fluids. If for some reason you still end up in contact with blood or body fluids, you've breached infection control. That's number one. Number two, you have to immediately be taken out of the clinical environment and tested and quarantined and removed from clinical environment and tested until it can be determined that you've not contracted an infection. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a doctor or a nurse and you're in a clinical environment and you accidentally get exposed to a needle stick from someone, a patient. You're not going back to work. You are going to be tested for hepatitis and HIV and everything, and make sure that you don't have these things before you're allowed back into a clinical environment. Well, Dr. Prasad says he comes in contact with this stuff every single day, and everybody does. And it's just what doctors do and what nurses do, and the administrators they don't, so they don't matter. Well, his statement really caught my attention because, first of all, it can't be true. And if it is, he's violating infection control, or UCSF doesn't have infection control, which is obviously not the case. It's a premier hospital. They have very good infection control. So I think he's just exaggerating and making bombastic statements to make a point, and his point is his hatred for hospital administration, and he doesn't want to be told what to do. But there's another point that I want to make about his article, Blood, Shit, Piss, and Pus. What he says in that article is a direct risk management threat for UCSF. He's alleging that there are breaks and breaches of infection control and sterilization and so forth all the time. Well, if that's the case, a plaintiff's attorney is going to love hearing that because they could use that against UCSF. If someone gets an iatrogenic infection in a hospital, they could use Dr. Prasad's statements as evidence that the hospital is liable for some infection control issue. He's a direct threat to that hospital from a risk management point of view. And he should not be allowed back in there because he says things that are absolutely outrageous. He's very vile, very vulgar, attacks everybody, criticizes people, talks down to people, threatens people, insults people in the media, in his various articles. And that's the reason why he got thrown out of FDA. And that's why his faculty, staff, his colleagues at UCSF have done the stunning. I've never seen this. I've been a doctor nearly 50 years. I've never seen a situation where colleagues at the hospital are going online with a petition demanding that another doctor not be brought back and given his job back. That is really astonishing. I hope that they don't give him his job back because he doesn't deserve the spotlight that he's been given. Anybody who says that hospital administrators, which he has said in another article he wrote, he referred to hospital administrators, some of whom are doctors, as, quote, vile pieces of shit. I'm sorry, but any doctor who talks like that and writes like that and treats people the way he treats people and puts the hospital in a bad position from a risk management point of view should not be working there. He needs to go do something else. So anyhow, that's my commentary for today. It's been a bad couple of weeks for RFK's appointees. Dr. Malone is out because he's unqualified. Dr. Means can't get past her confirmation. And now Dr. Prasad's got his own colleague saying, don't bring him back.
Yeah, you have some very interesting situations there, but my experience working with brilliant people, usually chess grandmasters, is they're weird. So, to me, this is not unusual. And same with top actuaries. So one of our top actuaries I interviewed said, I know everything about these pensions. I can do calculations, but I have one job requirement. So I asked Charles, what is it? He goes, I don't talk to people. Okay. And he didn't. And he went to his corner office. He did his work. He was great. He was brilliant, but he was absolutely horrible with people. But here, we're going to bring another brilliant person, a mega society member, and maybe he has some experiences.
Yeah, I'm brilliant, but weird. Yeah, I constantly.
Yeah, but you're not near as weird as some of these other people I've seen.
Well, I've worked on it. I worked at bars for 25 years, which trying to knock the edges off. Anyway, I didn't know about peptides till a couple days ago, and then peptides are this new thing. And RFK, who leads a movement of people who don't trust vaccines, is very willing to put in all sorts of untested garbage into himself. And the deal with peptides, only 100 peptides. Peptides are short chain amino acids that act as signals to your body, but we don't know what the signals are. It's all trial and error. There are 100 peptides approved for use by the FDA. There are 7,000 known peptides in the human body, and scientists say there could be millions of peptides out in nature. People are injecting peptides willy-nilly. The New Yorker just did an article on them. This guy went into Peptide World, bought a bunch of different peptides, had them tested in a lab, found out you're not getting what you're paying for. They're either contaminated with lead. If you buy stuff out of China, they're really bad at getting heavy metals out of the mix. Even if you get cinnamon from China to put in your coffee or your pound cake, a lot of it coming from China just has more than 1 part per million of lead in it. They're sloppy. And anyway, all the peptides he had tested turned out to be semi-garbage. And we don't even know exactly what they do. Plus, they're fragile. Just if they have to be injected. And if you pull the peptide out of the vial and then mix it with saline, which is how you prepare a shot, just the shaking of the fluid is enough to break the peptides and turn them into nothing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is really at the edge of science. This is not something that's been well studied. And it's so just graphically hypocritical to talk about removing vaccines from public use because they feel that they don't have gold standard science. The science behind vaccines, especially the mRNA vaccine, is far logarithmically superior to any of the science around peptides. There may be some utility to some of these peptides, but this is very early on. They need to be studied. This is a perfect example of why we need gold standard medicine. And it's hypocritical for Kennedy to talk about gold standard medicine and then on the one hand, and then advocate for peptides, broadly on the other. It's just
so the way to use
out of alignment.
The way to use peptides is to be a billionaire, so you can have your own private medical staff to get you to the right what they think are the right peptides, and then test them the day you use them to make sure they haven't degraded. Because even shining light on peptides is enough to break some of them up. If you just go to some mall where they've opened up a storefront and they're selling peptides, you don't know what the hell you're getting, and neither does the person who's selling you the stuff know what they're selling.
Yeah, that's a very important point. The thing with peptides is that, what is a peptide? Well, they're short chains of amino acids. Amino acids are discrete molecules. There are, I think, 23 different amino acids. I forget exactly, but you can put them together in chains. And there's an alphabet that you spell out when you sequence these various amino acids together. So a peptide is a short chain of amino acids. And then if you put enough amino acids together, you get proteins. Proteins are big, large molecules of hundreds or even thousands of amino acids. Peptides only have maybe 6 or 10 or 12. They're short chains of amino acids, and they are small molecules. You're right, they are very unstable small molecules, as opposed to a protein, say like albumin, which is, egg white. That's an example of a big protein. Egg white gets denatured when you expose it to heat. That's why it goes from clear to white when you fry an egg. But it's a big molecule. Peptides are tiny little molecules, and they are unstable and fragile, just exactly as you described.
Well, they're naked. They're naked.
Yes.
Your body has systems to preserve the information in DNA. DNA has 2 strands, so all the information is locked in because it's locked into its counterpart on the other side of the double helix. And I assume your body has all sorts of protective mechanisms to make sure that the messaging chemicals, the messaging chains are protected. But you're injecting naked stuff into your body, and it gets beaten up, and it may or may not, it may do what you want it to do, even if it's intact, and it may not be intact.
Yeah. The peptide thing really it became popular, just like testosterone, in the bodybuilding world. The bodybuilders are using all sorts of things. I mean, they're not shy about trying things out. Even if there's no real great science, they use a lot of just testimonial evidence and case reports and so forth, and they share information among one another. As if you go to the gyms and you see these really, these serious bodybuilders, they're taking all kinds of stuff. They're really experimenting on themselves. We really don't know a lot about what's going to happen. So a lot of bodybuilders have not done very well clinically when they get older.
Yeah,
so,
I know the guy that my college girlfriend dumped me for was a steroid dealer who was also kind of addicted to him himself. He's dead. He's been dead for a long time. Sadly. But if I hadn't looked in a bodybuilding magazine in years, and I looked in the back of bodybuilding magazines where they advertise all this. So steroids are illegal. They're a prescription drug. You can't just buy them. But what you can do is take that molecule that's illegal, and if you're even a lousy chemist, you just add one more atom to the molecule. Now it's a different molecule. That garbage atom doesn't change the action of the thing. It's still a steroid. It will still, but now it's legal because you changed it one little bit. And the back of bodybuilding magazines, they have dozens of ads for these, these modified steroids. So yeah, high school football players, guys who just want to have big biceps, you can get all this stuff. And steroids are cheap. Among all the drugs you can abuse, cocaine's expensive, steroids, dirt cheap.
There is a clinical role for steroid supplementation. There are people who truly have hypogonadism, and it is more common in elderly men. And there's evidence that supplemental testosterone use in the properly selected patient has a role. But there's a lot of abuse of this, and it goes on in the bodybuilding world. But it's just an example of the kind of hypocrisy. Now, I want to return, if it's okay, back to the Prasad story, because there's another important point. Prasad was clinically very, very highly qualified guy, but he had no qualifications in management or leadership. And there's another thing that you really should be trained in if you're going to be in a major leadership role. You have to have some understanding of basic principles of management and leadership. And abusing people verbally is not good management.
No.
And so that's why his colleagues at UCSF are really railing against his return, is because of that. It's just so fascinating that in short order, 2 of the most prominent people in the Trump Kennedy administration, physicians, have been ousted because of a problem with their backgrounds. Dr. Malone recently just resign from ACIP after the court found that he's not qualified. That was a big shocker because, he claims to be the world's authority. And yet the court studied his credentials and said, I'm sorry, you're not qualified. And he, rather than fight it, he just resigned. And now Dr. Prasad, who is very highly, he has a residency and a fellowship, unlike Dr. Malone, who never completed a residency or fellowship. Dr. Prasad is board certified. He's an oncologist. He's a real cancer doctor, a real expert. But his where he lacks qualifications is in management, and it really showed up in his tenure at FDA.
Yes. Another question I have relating to steroids, since we're bringing that up, and it looks like RFK loves steroids.
Yeah.
When I was in my younger, more halcyon days, I was told that if you take too many steroids, of course, you enlarge your biceps, but you also enlarge your heart.
Yes.
And what happens is, this was the warning, you enlarge your heart, then you end up having congestive heart failure at older ages. So I was cautioned away from using steroids that RFK jumps into. Is there any, is that still the standard theory? You increase your biceps, you increase your body, but you also increase your heart, which could create congestive heart failure.
It's a saying, the dose makes the poison. And with testosterone supplementation for people who have bona fide hypogonadism, who have low testosterone levels, you replace the testosterone at a dosage that restores the levels to normal. So you're back in the normal range, somewhere between the high and the low. And that's, if you're restoring it to a physiological normal state, then there's the incidence or likelihood of adverse effects is really negligible, because you're not going in a hyperphysiologic state. You're going back to the normal range. What the bodybuilders do is they supplement testosterone and other anabolic steroids far beyond what is in the normal physiologic range. They take doses that are super high, astronomical doses. Their testosterone levels are way off the charts, not in the boundaries of high and low. They're super physiologic. And there's no question that you just look at them, you see the size of these human beings. That is not natural. And it's not just in bodybuilding. This was also became the rage in other sports, in football and baseball too. We all know, what happened with Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. They became superhuman, and their production of their home runs and the distance they were hitting the ball. There's no question. These anabolic steroids, and probably also peptides, who knows, that mimic growth hormone, will make you bigger. And yes, if you're making your muscles bigger here, you're making your muscle bigger here too. Your heart is a muscle. Right. You can get obstructive cardiomyopathy from it. Yes.
If you go to guys get body dysmorphia. The same, it's like women getting anorexia. Guys get bigorexia, where a guy will start lifting weights, the kid, so that he looks better and can maybe get a girlfriend. But then he gets into the gym culture and forgets his initial objectives and starts you take a ton of steroids, your scalp gets greasy, you start losing your hair, and you've got freakishly large arms at some point, but now you're too freaky to get a girlfriend because you forgot what you started going to the gym for.
Yeah, it's funny, if you look at the current top bodybuilders in the world, Mr. Universe, they're the size that these men and women have achieved is really, there's no doubt that what they're doing builds muscle. There's no question about it. However, it's probably not safe in the long run. But we have a whole athletic enterprise now that's based upon manipulation of the hormonal environment to create these super huge. That's just, if you could lift weights all day long, and without the supplementation that they take, you'll never get as big as they are. These people are enormous.
Well, they ask athletes, would you trade athletic excellence, to be able to win an Olympic medal if it took 10 years off your life? And the majority of people said, yeah. And like a dumb high school kid who starts doing steroids, and somebody can say, yeah, this is going to cause you health problems 20 years down the line. That kid's like, yeah, but I want to look good now. And also 20 years from now, they'll figure out how to fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And with that, we're out of time, but we want to thank Dr. Michael Patmos, who is board certified in internal medicine, bringing us up to date on peptides and statins, and of course, Dr. Burchard, who's no longer going to be in a heavy role in Washington, D.C. And we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science on the Pod TV
Thank you.
Network.
Bye.
Bye-bye.